Okay.
It's July 7th, 2024, and I'm with Mr. John Jeckovich. And
Mr. John Jeckovich.
And he's a World War II hero.
World War II hero.
Battle of the Bulge primarily. And as a teenager, Purple Heart, many other medals, but that's not the point. The point is Mr. Jeckovich is knocking on the door of 100, and he's going to share his experiences with us from the war. And his book is once again entitled Their Mother's Sons, and that takes him basically from a kindergartner to his retirement. And today we're on
1864.
Today we're on chapter 7, which is titled Overseas and Beyond. He's in Europe now, and is going to all these young kids didn't know where they're going, but they're going to the Battle of the Bulge, because that was a extremely vicious struggle, bloody battle. Many of these teenagers, what experience do they really have to fight? But is as the winter of 1944 tightened its icy grip across Europe.
Who's that, what?
And we're speaking of the Battle of the Bulge right now, Mr. Jeckovich. Oh, how about your dog tag number so I can proceed? Your dog tag number, sir?
42995.
As the winter of 1944 tightened its icy grip across Europe, Nazi Germany found itself surrounded by powerful enemies intent on seizing Berlin and crushing the Third Reich once and for all. An interesting fact about World War II, approximately 30 years prior was World War I. And World War I, Mr. Jeckovich was not born yet, but World War I was supposed to be the war that ended all wars. But shortly thereafter, World War II, and we could go on example after example after example. We've been in so many wars since World War I.
So many wars, huh?
It's a continuous battle. We're in war now. And so in 1944, Hitler had his last hope, which is at the Battle of the Bulge, and crushing, where the Allies would be crushing the Third Reich once and for all. But keep in mind, if the Battle of the Bulge was not won, which it was.
Not what?
Keep in mind, if the Battle of the Bulge was not won, but which it was, we overpowered Hitler greatly. The war still would have came to the end, because the A-bomb that was dropped on Japan, if Hitler would have won the Battle of the Bulge, that A-bomb would have been dropped on Hitler, but we never had to get to that. Never had to get to that, thank God.
Yeah.
Yet despite all its precarious situation, Germany was far from defeated. Hitler knew it, clinging to one last shred of hope. Hitler was devised an audacious plan to strike at the Allies in the West in a bid to drive the wedge between them and turn the tide of the war into Germany's favor. Summoning thousands of men and machines, Hitler's commanders prepared to unleash one final assault, an onslaught that would catch the Allies off guard and remind the world that if Germany was to be beaten, many more Americans would have to perish first. The Battle of the Bulge would prove to be one of the bloodiest, most vicious struggles to the end. For example, the 106th Division was in the Battle of the Bulge, all young men, all good guys. Almost every one of them were slaughtered. They got caught in the middle, 100,000 Americans got caught in the middle, and Hitler had on the outskirts 400,000 Nazis ready to fight and fighting, and the 106th didn't have a prayer. And so the Battle of Bulge is very important, and the Battle of Bulge was from ambush, which Hitler first ambushed the Americans, to atrocity.
Yes, what?
how Hitler ambushed the young men and to the atrocities that would take place during the Battle of the Bulge. It's how the German ambush led to the worst atrocities committed on American servicemen in Europe during the whole World War. More horror took place in the Battle of Bulge to these young American soldiers. Let me tell the story. On December 17, 1945, at the crossroads of Hamlet of Bogsar, around 2 miles of Malmedy, a small column from Battery B, 285th Field Industry Observations Battalion of the 7th Army was spotted by a group of German tanks and the half-tracks from Haverfordwest. The Germans attacked, taking out the front and the rear trucks to prevent escape and raking the American column and machine gun fire and mortar shells. Several trucks exploded and more crashed in the ditches as they tried to get away. Taking cover behind stricken tanks and ditches, the Americans fought back as best as they could. They were really outnumbered. SS Oberstdorfer Pieper himself arrived at the skirmish, driving an American Jeep. So this low-life SS officer, he arrived at the scene driving an American Jeep. What a lousy bastard. Rapid progress and good management of the limited resources were the key to success for advancing the German armies. So this SS officer was not happy to see the time and ammunition being wasted on taking in the American enemies. He thought nor was he pleased that the trucks had been destroyed when they could have been extremely useful when they were captured. So this low-life SS officer arrives on the scene in an American Jeep, and he's extremely angry that the Germans are wasting so much ammo on these guys. We got the Americans' corners. What do we keep shooting? Let's just let them surrender, then we'll kill them. And then he's angry that all the Americans' equipment was destroyed when this SS officer wanted to take the Americans' trucks and tanks and use them for themselves. And this SS officer said, those beautiful trucks, which we needed so badly, all shot up. So now he's really angry. With difficulty, he called a ceasefire, and the Americans came out of cover with their hands up. So now this SS officer says, we're wasting our ammo. Let's call a ceasefire, and let's let these American soldiers come with their hands up and surrender. We're tired of sitting here wasting time. The SS officers, we said, we have to move ground. We have to move and take more ground. With difficulty, he called a ceasefire, and then the American GIs came out of cover with their hands up. Now, these are just teenage boys. Most of them were shot up. Several were still alive. The Germans herded them into small groups. And right off the bat, these low-life Nazi so-called soldiers, they took the rings, watches, cigarettes, and especially the gloves off all the American GIs they captured. The first shot, a small group of prisoners who stood in a line, a German put a pistol to their heads one by one, threatening to shoot them in retaliation for American bombing raids on Germany. So now they've captured these young American GIs, and the German soldiers are sticking a pistol to their head in retaliation for the American bombings on Germany. So the American bombings on Germany's, the RAF planes would bomb during the day, and the American planes would bomb all night. So there wasn't much left of Germany. They were completely devastated, the buildings. Tell us the time frame, how it worked. RAF bombers?
RAF bombed the daytime and US bombed at night.
Continual.
24 hours.
Continue. So these Nazis were angry about this, and they lined up all these prisoners and stuck the gun to their head and said, "You bastards, you've been bombing our cities." And then here's what saved it. The battalion executive officer, American officer, Captain Roger M. Mills, intervened. Despite the captain being mildly wounded, the men, he argued, should be treated as prisoners of wars. At that time, the Germans surprisingly backed down. When the column moved on to Luganville, the 10 men who'd been back of the half-track, they were kept there under guard and later moved to Germany. Piper, that's the SS himself, then left the seat in another half-track. So this SS guy is picking up American Jeeps, whatever else he can take. He's just a low-life thief. Take what he can. The remainder of the prisoners, here we go. The remainder of the prisoners from Battery B were herded into a field along with other prisoners taken that day. All told, there are around 100 to 130 captured young men.
Yeah, I remember that.
You remember that?
Then the Germans put back their trucks up with had blankets on the back and bottom of it. When they got set up, they pulled the blankets back and had machine guns set up to tell all those guys.
Did you see that?
We were pretty close.
And then they stood in rows of about 60 feet from the highway with their hands above their heads. Their hands now devoid of gloves, because the Germans took all their gloves, soon grew numb in the cold weather air. So now they have these young American GIs standing with their hands up, no gloves at all. How long could a human being stand up? Most of them are probably injured. How long could you stand up and have your hands above your heads? It's almost physically impossible for doing it for long periods of times. However, if your hands would drop, boom, you're shot right on the spot. You're shot right on the spot. So their hands were now devoid of gloves, soon grew numb in the cold weather. Although the prisoners did not relish the idea of spending Christmas in a POW camp. I mean, you're there right now because you fought the Battle of Bulge during Christmas. So you're like miles from this taking place. You're like miles from this atrocity. They did not relish the idea of spending Christmas in a POW camp. They assumed they were waiting for transportation trucks and not unduly concerned about their safety. So all these young men are lined up, 120, 130. They must keep their hands up. Hands are numb, it's cold. The Germans took their gloves. If the hands would drop, if you got tired, boom, you're dead, you're shot. So I'm sure the young American soldiers were worried and scared, but they thought they're waiting on the highway. They thought they were waiting on the highway for the Germans that come with transport trucks to take them to a prisoner of war camp. So they didn't think they were in immediate danger of death. However, a German officer then flagged down 2 Panzer IV tanks. Do you remember seeing the Panzer IV tanks, Mr. Jeckovich? The Panzer IV tanks?
Yeah.
Describe to us.
They were big tanks.
Okay.
High and wide.
Yeah.
What do they sound like?
How they
They
sound?
make a lot of noise.
Okay, so now all these young boys are lined up on the highway thinking they're waiting for the transport truck to take them to camp. They were excited about it, but they didn't think they were in real immediate danger. Then the German officer flagged down 2 Panzer tanks and ordered them into position, covering the troops. He then ordered them to fire. So all these young Americans are lined up, and he ordered them to fire. A young private had his pistol ready, fired the first shot. So a young German soldier had his pistol ready and fired the first shot, causing disorder amongst the prisoners. So now the prisoners are kind of spooked. With their officers trying to quench for fear of provoking more shots. It was to no avail. The machine guns came out of trucks that had drapes over them on both tanks, and also fired, massacring the prisoners. The firing lasted around 15 minutes, after which troops from the 3rd SS Pioneer Company walking around the bodies, shooting anyone that moved in the head. So 15 minutes, the machine guns are hitting these poor GIs that had no weapons, their hands are up. And then after that, the low-life SS are walking amongst their bodies, And if they see the slightest movement in American GI bodies, boom, right to the head. And to be more sadistic, sometimes they took the butt of their gun when these young kids are laying in horrible pain from machine gun and bust their heads open with the butt of their gun. Yeah. And so the SS Pioneer Company walked around the bodies, shooting anyone that moved in the head. Some asked any survivors identify themselves, promising medical treatment. So now these con artists, German soldiers, there's a field of 120, 130 young men just laying there, and the Germans are yelling out, if anyone needs any medical treatment to these wounded soldiers, yell it out, we'll get you help. That was a signal they were still alive, and then they'd go up and blow their heads off.
Yeah.
Honorable people. Some asked any survivors to identify themselves, promising medical treatment, and they shot anyone that responded that they needed help. Anyone that responded was dead. The officers who stopped the tanks, gave the initial order to fire, was eventually identified as Major Werner Boschlik, a commander of the 1st SS Panzer Battalion. However, has he been killed he was killed during the war. It was entirely possibly he was used as a scapegoat to cover up the real culprit. The cutdown. A medic called Doughboys made a run for it. This is an American soldier, a medic, getting 20 to 30 yards before cut down by machine gun fire. Although wounded several times, he was still alive, unbeknownst to the Germans, who let him lie there. Several more ran, but most were gunned down before they got far. Around a dozen Americans took refuge in a nearby cafe, which the Germans burned down, shooting the troops as they escaped. Those who remained alive in the field pretended to be dead. Pretended to be dead, holding their breath for the fear that the cold, their visible breath would give them away. As American First Lieutenant Virgil Larry Jr. remembers, a bullet went through the head of the man next to me. This is American Lieutenant. A bullet went through the hand of a head next to me. I lay tensely still, expecting the end. And he's saying to himself, could the Nazis see me breathing? Could I take a kick in the groin without a wince? Because I'd kick him in the groin too to see if they moved. He was standing over my head. Time seemed to stand still. And then I heard him reloading his pistol in a deliberate manner. A few odd steps before loading, he finished and he was no longer close to my head. And then there was another shot a little further away, and he had passed me up. The aftermath. The aftermath. At around 2:30, oh shit. Hi, Tommy. Hey, I'm reading my dad. Can I call you back in a little bit? Or did you want to text me? You all right? Where are you at? All right, bye. At around 2:30, Colonel Persian, a commander of the 291st Engineers, left Malmby and headed into Bronx in a jeep accompanied by his communications sergeant, William Krickenberger. On seeing the burning cafe, they approached the field and rescued 3 survivors. Now these are the Americans coming to the scene, who they took back to Malmedy. After they had recovered from the shock of the ordeal, they were able to explain to what happened. Persian got the word back to General Hodges in the spot of both the Malmedy massacre and the German troop movements. A few more survivors were rescued on the following day. News of the massacre spread quickly through the American troops.
Did you hear about that, John?
Yes, he was only miles away.
Oh, wow.
News about the massacre spread quickly through the Allied troops and ranks, causing an inevitable uproar. Feelings ran high. The vengeance was sought. One American unit ordered that no SS troops, this is one American unit, whole complete unit. How many are in the unit?
Yeah. They say uniforms.
How many soldiers in a unit? How many soldiers in a unit?
Well, it depends what you're talking. The division, platoon,
A unit, a platoon.
platoon, 150.
Okay. One American troop, 150, ordered that no SS troops or paratroopers, German paratroopers, will be taken prisoner without being shot on sight. So now the Americans are saying, if you're a German paratrooper or SS,
You're gone.
we're not taking you in, you're dead. 5 days later, a heavy snowfall covered 86 bodies that remained in the field.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
Because the Bosniak's crossroads by then fell between Allied and German lines, it was not until after the Allied counteroffensive that they were recovered on 14th of January, 1945. So those poor kids that were shot, they couldn't pick them up for many days later. They just laid in the snow and deteriorated.
They were frozen stiff.
You remember seeing frozen stiff?
Huh?
You remember picking them up frozen stiff? Did you remember picking them up frozen stiff?
Yeah.
They were photographed where they lay and removed to Malmby for an extensive post-mortems. It was found at least 20 of the dead were killed by close-range gunshots to the head.
Yeah.
So they just stuck the gun and blew the
They
head
were
off.
massacred. They were massacred.
Massacre. 20 of the dead were killed at close-range gunshots to the head. In many cases, this was the only wound. Around 10 had blunt force trauma injuries, most likely from the butt of rifle butts. When the Nazis would see him moving a bit, they'd take his butt of his gun and beat the shit out of you. And most of the bodies were tightly packed together, suggested they were gathered before being killed. It was the worst atrocity committed on American servicemen in Europe during the whole World War II. Some of the SS troops involved in the massacre later argued that the prisoners had been trying to escape or had produced concealed weapons. What a lie. The SS said we slaughtered them because they were trying, the American soldiers were showing they had concealed weapons or they're trying to escape. Now that's a total lie.
Huh.
And were fired on the German troops. Now they said the American prisoners are firing on the German troops. Another lie. But the evidence showed otherwise. After the war, 73 members of the Kampfgruppe SS were tried for the Malmedy massacre and all their other atrocities carried out against them, soldiers and civilians. 43, including Piper himself, that's the SS head guy, Piper himself, was sent.
They pulled those covered trucks up
Yeah.
with a flap on the back, line them all up, and then the guy said they were going to get a shower or something. So the Germans and the truck pulled the carpet back and had machine guns there, and they just slaughtered them all.
Yeah. Well, 43 of them after the war were tried, including Piper, the head SS himself, and they were sentenced to death by hanging. Although no death sentences were actually carried out, 22 were sentenced to life imprisonment and 8 received lesser prison sentences.
That was after the trials.
Yeah. How many minutes?
4.
4 minutes? So that
Yeah.
was a shame. You remember recovering the bodies frozen? You remember recovering the bodies that were frozen?
Did you help recover the bodies that were frozen?
What?
Did you help recover some of the bodies that were frozen from the 106?
No, we didn't do it. They had a special medic team come in and do it.
Okay.
No, we didn't do it, no.
During the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler was so convinced that he would win because that the German paratroopers were vital to his last great offensive, but their involvement rapidly descended into a farce.
German paratroopers.
So
Yeah.
here we are with John Jeckovich, July 7th, 2024, and we're on chapter 7 of his book once again, Overseas and Beyond.
Do you remember seeing German paratroopers, John?
Yeah. I seen them dead and alive.
How many minutes?
3.
Fink, Lape, and I went back to the shower room, found a small bench location to shed our clothes, and commenced to take a hot shower in the fresh water, something we have not done since leaving Breckenridge. After a refreshing shower, we shaved in our shorts below the row of sinks, putting on a fresh, clean fatigues. We made our way to the billets. As we walked back, it gave us an opportunity to explore the immediate surroundings more closely. The people we encountered on our walk were friendly and eager to find out where in the states we were from. The minutes? We soon discovered most of the Welsh people had a relative or even a distant relation somewhere in the United States.
Just under 3.
So a lot of the people from Welsh had relatives in the United States.
Huh?
A lot of people,
From Wales?
a lot of Welsh people in Wales had a lot of relatives in the United States, and they'd be asking you what part of the United States you're in.
Germans were asking for that.
We were surprised. What surprised me was that there was no great destruction of all the bombing of England we had heard about in the States. The natives informed us that there was a distance from London, which got burnt of the bombing. So London got hit very bad by the Germans.
What?
London buildings were destroyed by the
Yeah,
Germans.
they had a number of them trials there, but
But
they
in
were good.
Haverfordwest, you didn't see any damages in Wales.
They were 20 years in jail. Leavenworth.
After more questioning, they told us that they were a little over 200 miles away from London. During the actual raid at night, they could hear the thumping of the bombs as they exploded and actually see flashes of bright light in the distant sky. They also informed us most of the children under 16 from London were living with relatives somewhere else from the immediate family in the surrounding small towns and villages. They
The
also,
Germans, right?
yeah, the people living in London, the kids moved out of London, so they didn't get killed by the bombings, and they moved to small towns like Haverfordwest. It all seemed to take the effects of the war with much calmness and dignity, even though they were in closer proximity to it than we were. They also displayed, this is the people from Wales, they also displayed a firmness of conviction that they're capable of driving Germany and its warlords from their tiny island. Minutes?
1.
We arrived back at the billets just in time for formation to march down to the mess hall. The march would start at Milford Road and cross the first intersection of Albert Street and Shipman's Lane. We continued into Dew Street, which was steep grade down until we reached the intersection of Tower Hill and Market Street. After passing the intersection, High Street leveled off a bit, passing the crossroads of Bridge and Quay Streets. Victoria Place was fairly level, half a mile past the bridge, and Quay was the mess hall. It was a good 2.5 mile march, and we enjoyed it greatly.
18 seconds. I'll finish it up right now. We just talked to him.
Yeah. So it was a long walk to the mess hall.
Yeah.
Long mess to the mess hall.
That's in the wintertime, too.
Yeah. But you're happy to walk, you're happy to get out. Minutes?